Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. Today is Tuesday, July 17th, 2012. I'm your host, Aaron Dykes.
Tonight, outrage after local news channel helps public identify gun owners using a system similar to that identifying sex offenders. Then, Iceland has hired an ex-cop to hunt down the bankers that wrecked its economy. And the Pentagon releases comics for globalist domination. All this, plus we replay a special interview from Jeffrey Smith, one of the leading food safety and genetically modified researchers in the country. Grab your pencil and paper because you won't want to miss this interview. All this and more on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Tonight in the news, outrage after a local news station helps the public identify gun owners. It's as if they're sexual offenders, and there's a registry showing where their homes are located, what streets they live on, as WRAL in Raleigh, North Carolina has a whole database honing in on the fact that rural people own more guns than city people, and that the concealed permit carriers are located basically on the fringes of these different areas, as if it's some problem. But they try to demonize gun ownership as if this is a liberal thing the government has allowed to go on and they should rein it in, and how really concealed weapons owners are the dangerous people, that they're somehow criminals or suspected criminals. And so you've got concerned resident David Knight. He's actually one of our reporter contest entries. He was towards the top. He almost won the contest. He sent us an email warning that although street numbers are not shown yet, they point out that most of the carry permits are in rural areas. On my road, for example, there's only 4 addresses. On other roads where you could find on there's maybe 1 or 2 homes, basically tipping off criminals to where there's weapons in the home and where there isn't, and allowing them to be persecuted by people who are terrified of firearms despite the Second Amendment. This information has only previously been available through written requests to the state's Bureau of Investigation, but now it's being publicized in effort to basically demonize gun ownership. Knight says the news station's act of helping the public identify gun owners is an attempt to name and shame, while suggesting the Second Amendment advocates pose a threat akin to sex offenders, which is ridiculous. However, this article out of North Carolina cites the New York Times, which has totally demonized concealed carry, made a case study of North Carolina to try to convince the public that those who hold weapons are the criminals, when, of course, real criminals don't register their guns, they don't buy them on the market, they don't go through background checks. But you've got Gail McNeil, executive director of North Carolinians Against Gun Violence, claiming that concealed weapons permit holders are not as law-abiding as they appear to be. And then they link to the New York Times report from December 2011, where they say guns in public and out of sight. And they highlight the story of one individual who randomly shot at a biker because he was hogging up too much of the road, really shooting at him without any reason. Now, he pled guilty to assault with a deadly weapon. I assume he's in prison. But they directly link him to more than 240,000 concealed carry permit owners in North Carolina. And they say, while it's a small percentage of them, many of them are criminals. And it goes on to cite 2,400 permit holders, 1% of that number, as having been convicted of felonies or misdemeanors. But then they go on to explain that of 2,400, really only 200 were convicted of felonies, and 10 people were murderers among 240,000 concealed permit carriers. I wonder what the number is among the general public. But they just want you to think these are the criminals, these are the people who are going to commit crimes, so they're trying to create a scare about it. In fact, in the WARL article, Peggy Elrod, who's basically a gun shop owner, says some of them believe this is the criminal element, people who train to use guns. So you've got the whole permit process, which turns the right to bear arms into a so-called privilege. Then they try to demonize the privilege, say they've been too loose with the rules, and basically saying they need to rein in people who are even allowed to have concealed carry permits. When you can always open carry, you can always bear arms, but they, of course, don't want it to appear that way. That's okay. The UN gun grab is coming. Turning to Iceland, this is a positive story, actually, because in all the other parts of the Western world, they refuse to even suggest that bankers are part of the problem of this worldwide depression that's looming. All the derivatives they traded to put all these countries in debt, in dire straits, to make the banks ready to collapse, and to try to get the public to pay for the whole collapse of the whole thing. Well, that didn't happen in Iceland. They said no to the banker debt, and now they have a white-collar crime investigator, a former local police lieutenant named Olafur Hauksson, who's going to be tracking down individuals who helped sink the country into the credit crunch. He's already brought a bunch of convictions, and he's going for more, including the former chief of staff of the country's finance minister, who is accused of insider trading charges. And they are not only tracking down the suspects, but help bringing the actual charges in the case to the court to make sure that things follow through in a reasonable manner. So Iceland really should be the model of how to keep your sovereignty in the midst of the financial crisis, how to not commit suicide by tying yourself to the bankers and drowning in a big lake. But instead, the media covers up Iceland and wants you to literally bow down to Goldman Sachs as they take over every other European country and get ready to do it here in the U.S. Just a very interesting story to keep our eye on. Now, Alex has a video just tearing apart Obama's latest speech where he says, if you produce something, you better thank the state for it, because the state basically helped you live, helped the sun come up, helped things happen in the modern world. Big indictment. Here's that video right now.
If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something. There are a whole bunch of hard-working people out there. If you were successful, somebody along the line gave you some help. There was a great teacher somewhere in your life. Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we had that allowed you to thrive. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. The internet didn't get invented on its own. Government research created the internet, so then all the companies could make money off the internet.
Barack Obama is bought and paid for by monopolistic capitalists who are anti-free market and who are extremely cold-blooded in their publicly stated orthodoxy of world corporate government, where they're exempt from all the laws they put on us. But Obama basically plays the part of a communist populist. We heard this from Lenin, Stalin, Mao, his mentor, the Marxist-Leninist Frank Marshall Davis. I mean, Obama brags about it in his book. Anybody who's read hardcore communist writings knows that the things that Obama covers in the speech he gave this weekend, campaign speech, is directly out of the Communist Manifesto and the planks of the Communist Manifesto. And if you read those planks, we're so close to it today. The issue is this is not a movement of the grassroots. Read None Dare Call It Conspiracy. We sell it at INFOWARS.com, written back in '71. It shows how Arm & Hammer, David Rockefeller, all of them, his dad before him, funded Lenin and Stalin. It's now declassified. Our government helped put Mao into power. Look it up. In '49, he killed over 60 million people. They want thugs, whether they're fascist or communist, that control countries. Okay, Bill Clinton's mentor wrote Tragedy and Hope, 1,400 pages. Head of Georgetown Political Science, breaking it down. This is the real world. But he gives this incredible speech and sells the population that, hey, collectivism is good. It's what makes things great. We know the type of collectivism that does not have the people's consent creates total nightmares. Every once in a while, if a crisis happens or something, you can see forms of collectivism that do create some breakthroughs. But generally, I'd say about 98% of the time, it is pure poison. And even if you have some philosopher king who directs some good things at a point, things degenerate later, and now those big systems of power that have been created and centralized are taken over by monopoly groups and mafia groups, and it creates a hellish situation. Look at every collectivist model. China, Russia, all these other countries that have done it. It produces tens of millions of dead. Now, you can go to InfoWars.com or LouRockwell.com and read this Comrade Obama praise the state, ungrateful individual is heathen. And remember now, 51% of the U.S. lives on a government paycheck. And I understand they took your money your whole life, and now you can say it's your money. The point is they've got you under their control. But for Social Security and people out there, they're already devaluing your check with inflation. And wait till QE3 hits that they're just now starting to announce. So here's a clip of Obama, and then I'm going to break down some of the speech and the fact that he's visiting Austin today here on INFOWARS Nightly News.
They know they didn't. If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you.
All right, let's pause it right there. And he goes on and on. Remember, they've now got 51% and growing of the population totally dependent on government. I saw this number from LouRockwell.com and looked it up. It's true. Did you know that they've doubled the number of people on welfare in just 3.5 years? Doubled. Because, yes, the banksters in this monopoly economy are putting things into a depression. So a lot of people would be in trouble if they didn't have it. But they create an atmosphere where you've got to go to them for help. And then they can use that giant mob as a political army, just like they're now announcing the, quote, free government health care for the illegals, but citizens have to pay for it. That's now been announced. And, old people won't get the treatment now because it's all rationed. The death panels, it's all being announced. But understand this, even if you believe in collectivism, they don't have the consent. This is an offshore banking cartel with people like Warren Buffett, the biggest single recipient of the banker bailout in 2008 through 2010. Look it up. It's New York Times, Wall Street Journal. He's quite proud of it. He's always saying, I'm rich, I don't pay enough taxes, raise taxes on me. Because he knows they helped write the laws where he's exempt. People won't look at the fine print. He's basically exempt, just like Mitt Romney is, just like General Electric and Google are. Most of these companies pay zero tax. He used your tax money with the General Motors bailout to move it to Brazil, Eastern Europe, and China. 22 bill, Cadillac, and Volt. Look it up. You cannot make this up. So he's here telling you he's going to save you with big government with all these desperate people. But they're going to give you the opposite. It's a corporate blowout, a corporate takeover, a hostile takeover with communist rhetoric to try to appease people that are in bad shape, saying capitalism's the problem. You see Newsweek, Time, all of them say capitalism failed. It wasn't capitalism to have powerful elites come in and get rid of Glass-Steagall and allow themselves to create over 1,000 trillion in derivatives and then have their agents in government sign us onto their debts and then tell us that it's our debt. You understand? This is the domestication happening right now, continuing. I mean, this is amazing communist speech, folks.
Tell you something. There are a whole bunch of hard-working people out there.
Yeah, don't worry. Just like all these other countries that go into communism and socialism, soon you're not going to have a job. I see these comments sometimes on these YouTube videos going, yeah, in socialist countries, there's 100%